In upstate Washington, a young girl sets off for home, then vanishes.
We said, bye, I'll see you tomorrow. And I didn't see her.
I can't find her anywhere. I don't know where else to look for her.
Her quiet hometown becomes a crime scene, and everyone in it, a potential suspect.
It brought them to the terrible realization that bad things happen to little kids, even in little towns.
Then, when an Atlanta teenager disappears without warning, her mother takes to the streets.
I knew that my daughter is not going to just walk away like that.
She felt very comfortable going around and asking the hard questions.
Her relentless search brings her face to face with a suspected killer.
I went to his house, I knocked on his door, and I asked him, I said, "Where's my daughter?"
In 2005, I got the call telling me that my daughter, Natalie, had vanished.
Every parent's worst nightmare became my reality.
I asked the world to help me.
I found myself in an unimaginable fight. But my search for answers gave me a new mission in life.
Bring the missing home and criminals to justice.
In the tiny logging town of McCleary, Washington, a true stranger is hard to come by.
If you lived in McCleary, the chances are that you would recognize 75% of the people that live in McCleary.
In September 2007, the people of McCleary welcomed 3 new faces to their small town. Recent divorcee Melissa Baum and her children, Josh and Lindsay.
Lindsay was actually born in Tennessee. My ex-husband was in the Army, and so we moved around quite a bit.
Once I got off active duty, Melissa started missing Washington because she grew up there. I've tried to get her to come back to Tennessee before the divorce, and her and the kids moved back there, and I stayed here.
At first, the adjustment is difficult. 9-year-old Lindsay desperately misses her father.
Melissa says it just tore them apart, but they just need to realize Mom didn't like it here and Daddy don't like it there.
She had a rebellious phase. She was a little angry. Well, she was a lot angry. But compared to the way her brother handled it, she handled it pretty well.
After the divorce, 12-year-old Josh has trouble coping with his anger.
Josh kind of got lost in the middle of all this. He was having a lot of explosions at his mom.
According to multiple reports, Josh also begins to physically act out against classmates, police officers, and even his little sister.
I really think they had a good relationship. Siblings would be siblings. It's a love-hate relationship. You love to hate them.
But by the spring of 2009, Josh and Lindsay seem to have made peace with their parents' separation, and Lindsay has returned to her old bubbly self.
She just has this overwhelming life force that just kind of draws you in. She can wear you out just listening to her and talking to her. She's just so full of energy and life.
Lindsay has also found a new best friend in Michaela Campen.
We used to just walk around, go and play at the park and stuff. We had a lot of fun.
Her and Michaela were inseparable. They were always doing something, always planning something.
Thursday, June 25th is no exception. Summer vacation has just begun, and Lindsay and Michaela celebrate by spending the night at Lindsay's house. The following morning, June 26th, the 2 girls, along with Josh, get up bright and early and head to a pool party.
They got up and ate and took off to go to another friend's house to swim.
Joining them are nearly a dozen other kids from the neighborhood.
Just a beautiful day, and they were just excited. The kids were all over the place. They'd been back and forth from my house to where they were swimming 2 or 3 times that day at least.
At 8:20 p.m., Lindsay, Michaela, Josh, and several friends head back to the Baum's house. Lindsay asks her mother, Melissa, if Michaela can spend the night again. Melissa says yes.
They took off to go down to Michaela's to get some clothes.
But Michaela's mother, Kara, tells them the sleepover will have to wait.
We had actually had plans to go to the beach the following morning, and so I told her no, that I told her, you better get home. It's going to get dark.
At 9:30 p.m., with the sun rapidly setting, Lindsay sets off on the 10-minute walk home.
She said, bye, Michaela, I'll see you tomorrow. I was like, bye, I'll see you tomorrow. And I didn't see her.
9:50. The sun has set on McCleary, and Lindsay Baum still isn't home. Her mother is beginning to worry.
I started trying to call her friend's house to see if she'd left yet, so that if she hadn't, she needed to get on the road. And they said, well, she left about 20 minutes ago.
Melissa calls every parent she knows, but no one has seen Lindsay since she left Michaela's house.
We knew at that point that we needed to be out looking because something was wrong. Lindsay should have been home.
Fearing her daughter may be hurt, Melissa enlists the help of the Campen family, and together they set out in search of Lindsay. But an hour later, Lindsay is still nowhere to be found. Melissa is starting to panic.
By the time dark came, I knew that there was a problem and I needed to call in for help.
Grace Harbor Communications, this is Tammy. Hi, Tammy. I am needing some help looking for my daughter. I can't find her anywhere. I don't know where else to look for her.
And what's your daughter's name?
Lindsay. The police here, they know her. It's Josh's sister, Lindsay Baum.
Within minutes, local police respond to Melissa's 911 call. Meanwhile, Grays Harbor Sheriff's officers monitor their progress on the radio. Among them is detective and missing persons specialist Polly Davin.
Melissa Baum had made a call to 911 at 10:50, and the sheriff's office heard the radio traffic and said, could you use our help? So from there, we got a ground search started.
When you don't have a crime scene to secure, how did you go about deciding what to capture at that moment?
In situations like this, the first thing that you want to do is you want to canvass the entire neighborhood. You want to talk to everybody that you can talk to.
But after speaking with Lindsay's best friend, police officers believe she might not want to be found.
Michaela had, told me that she'd made comments about running away. So I called in the chief and gave him the updated information that I had a runaway.
And he thought maybe that she was mad and was hiding, trying to prove a point to me, which I didn't dismiss that at the time.
Convinced Lindsay couldn't have gone far, officers begin searching for her along the route between her house and Michaela's.
Anything where someone could, run and hide, we checked that. Any, lawnmower sheds and backyards, all those type of things. You're trying to, think of how a kid would think if they were running away and trying to hide from you.
Sheriff's officers briefly wonder if Lindsay might have run off in an attempt to reunite with her father. But neither Lindsay's mom nor dad think that's the case.
She didn't take anything with her. She had no money, and there was no way out of town. The buses here in town quit running before she'd even left my house that evening.
I was asked, when was the last time I talked to her? Do you think that she would come out to see you? She didn't know my address. She didn't have the phone number. All she knew was I lived in Tennessee.
7 a.m. the following morning. Friends, neighbors, and law enforcement have searched all night for Lindsay. There's still no sign of her. In the meantime, sheriff's officers have alerted the media, printed hundreds of flyers, and are mobilizing teams of search dogs to scour the woods surrounding McCleary.
Were there any special places that were fairly close by that the children would want to go and play in, whether it was a wooded area, a stream, that they would go?
McCleary is surrounded by wooded areas, and that was part of our ground search, was to just pound every piece of property there. Look in the brush, look again in the brush, go back third time and a fourth time.
Time is precious when anybody's missing, and those first few hours, you won't get them back. So you really need to put all your effort and strength into it.
The persistence pays off. After passing a flyer on the street, a local woman tells investigators she saw Lindsay mere moments before she disappeared, and just a few blocks from the Baum house.
This is the area of the point last seen. Lindsay would have been walking towards us from the west, traveling eastbound here on Maple Street.
It's a lightly traveled road in a safe, working-class neighborhood. So why didn't Lindsay make it home?
This happened just, you know, like right underneath everybody's nose.
They made that walk at least 100 times before.
Everyone is now beginning to fear something terrible has happened.
I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong.
There was no evidence of her missing of her own volition. You know, this didn't appear to be a runaway. It didn't feel like a runaway investigation. Things just didn't feel right.
In the small town of McCleary, Washington, 10-year-old Lindsay Baum has vanished. 24 hours into their search, police have a witness who saw Lindsay walking toward her house, but they have no clue what happened next.
I think somebody took her, and I think it was somebody that maybe she knew or thought she could trust, but for whatever reason, somebody took her.
But who? Midway through day 2 of their search, investigators uncover a crucial detail that could answer that question. Roughly an hour before her disappearance, on the way to her friend Michaela's house, several witnesses saw Lindsay and her 12-year-old brother Josh locked in a heated argument.
Josh and Lindsay had gotten into a verbal argument over a bicycle.
Apparently she was using his bike, he didn't want her to use the bike, and there was sort of a struggle, which was not unheard of between any brother and sister, but especially these two.
Josh has the things about his bike, and they had an argument over the bike, so parents sent Josh home and let Lindsay continue on her way.
The incident seems harmless enough, but coupled with Josh's troubled past, it raises a red flag with investigators. They decide to take a closer look at Josh's whereabouts that evening.
Obviously, that was a concern to us. We thought that perhaps that might speak to some knowledge or involvement in her disappearance.
Melissa Baum claims Josh was at home with her at the time of Lindsay's disappearance. Investigators ask her to take a polygraph test to prove it.
The mom was polygraphed, and results indicate that it looks like she was being truthful with us.
Following the polygraph results, police rule out Josh as a suspect, but the entire ordeal has taken its toll on him.
He has a lot of guilt, a lot of guilt. He feels like he should have been with her, and that he feels he could have protected her.
He was blaming himself. If we wouldn't have fought, I would have been with Lindsay, and I could have fought off whoever did it. I've tried telling him, son, you're a big boy, but you may not have been able to.
With his unit set to deploy for Iraq in less than a month, Josh and Lindsay's father, Scott, makes the cross-country trip to McCleary to help locate his daughter and console his troubled son.
I wanted to get his mind off of it and see if we could calm him down some, because he beats himself up because he was really the last one out of our family that saw Lindsay that night.
As the Baums struggle to keep Josh on an even keel, investigators continue questioning the residents of McCleary.
You think on a summer evening like that there would be people out mowing the lawn or maybe watering their flowers, or you'd think there would be at least an on-foot eyewitness.
McCleary is your typical small town. Kids are out in the evening. People are out walking. It's just very odd that she's not seen beyond that point.
I made that walk at 9:30 at night. That street is so bright. I don't see how she could have just vanished without anybody seeing anything or hearing anything.
There is one other hope for finding Lindsay. A surveillance camera at the gas station located at the intersection of Maple and Mommsen, midway along the route Lindsay took the night she disappeared.
It was the one business that she would have had to have literally walked past or through that was open for business at the time that she would have been out and about.
Did the cameras at the gas station primarily just sweep the pumps, the entrance into the parking lot, the street around the gas station?
You could see out to the pumps. You can see a couple of different angles of people inside the store. And there's another camera that showed basically people entering from the side and parking on the side. Unfortunately, there's not a camera that looks out onto Mommsen so that we can see, whether Lindsay made it that far.
Although Lindsay is nowhere on the tapes, There are dozens of patrons who do appear around the time she vanished. Investigators treat each of them as a potential suspect.
What we were trying to do is, as discreetly as possible, figure out who people were, talk to them then about what it was that they were doing in McCleary on that particular evening.
It will take months or even years for investigators to identify everyone on the tape. In the meantime, volunteers pour into McCleary to search for Lindsay.
We went through the attics of every house. We went through the crawl spaces. We went through the trailers that were parked in the back of the residences. We went through the sheds, freezers, everything you can think of.
There wasn't a square foot of McCleary that hadn't been stepped on by somebody associated with this investigation.
Lindsay's case is now making headlines across the country.
So far, detectives haven't figured it out. The FBI hasn't figured it out.
And even though they've successfully identified several people on the surveillance video, police are hesitant to publicly eliminate anyone as a person of interest.
They were keeping it pretty close to the chest as to not scare anybody away or make somebody think that they had gotten away with it.
By July 6th, Scott Baum's unit is ready to deploy to Iraq, but not Scott Baum. He has stayed behind to continue searching for Lindsay and turns to the media for help.
Please bring my daughter home. I'm fixing to deploy to Iraq, and tomorrow is her birthday. I would love nothing more than to see my daughter before I have to go.
Despite her father's plea, Lindsay's 11th birthday comes and goes.
At this point, emotions just have to be really just raw for everyone involved.
You know, nobody was giving up. Everybody was fully invested in this. We were working days straight with no days off, working 16, 17-hour days.
By early September, Detective Davin and her fellow officers have questioned and cleared almost everyone in McCleary. But there are still a few alibis that don't check out, including that of a 23-year-old nursing home aide who lives just outside of town.
He had worked at a retirement facility on Maple Street where Lindsay had been last seen alive. He said that he was at work that night, and it turned out when investigators talked to his superior at work, they found out that he was not at work that night.
Even more suspicious is a disturbing remark the man made about Lindsay in the early days of the search.
He said, "Oh yeah, that girl is dead and dismembered somewhere." And that caught a lot of people off guard because that hadn't been reported anywhere. There was nothing to suggest that. So why was this guy saying that?
Investigators decide to dig deeper into the man's background and discover that at age 14, he had been the lone suspect in the attempted rape of a young girl. On September 25th, a swarm of officers and FBI agents descend on the man's house.
They did seize a long list of items, computers, photos, duct tape. I mean, they cleared that place out.
We look for everything from fiber-type evidence to evidence of any kind of biohazard to see if there's any evidence that would link to Lindsay's disappearance.
I let myself get my hopes up, you know, thinking this is it, we're going to find her.
But after combing the property for 2 days, authorities come up empty-handed.
It ended up being a tremendous use of resources and a waste of time beyond the fact that we were able to move on to other subjects and other scenarios and rule this out.
3 months into the search for Lindsay, and the investigation is back to square one. In the 3 months since Lindsay Baum vanished, investigators have conducted more than a dozen searches and questioned nearly all of McCleary, Washington's 1,500 residents. But none of that hard work has brought them any closer to finding Lindsay.
During the investigation, we served a number of search warrants, and those search warrants, if we didn't find anything with them, at least it helped us move on to another aspect of the investigation.
Investigators now focus their search on the surveillance cameras at the gas station just down the street from where Lindsay disappeared. But identifying everyone caught on tape is proving to be a difficult task.
Most of the folks who were in the surveillance video, the police chief could say, "Oh, that's Larry," or that's so-and-so. We know who those people are. We know where they were when Lindsay was missing. But there were a handful of people who were question marks.
In April 2010, police ID a man from the surveillance tape. He's seen buying beer just minutes after Lindsay was last spotted.
This individual was seen leaving the station and walking back towards his residence, which would have put him on a path that would have intersected Lindsay's walk home.
The man had been interviewed during the first few weeks of the investigation, but police review his initial statement. They make an alarming discovery.
He told us unequivocally that he had not been out and about on that evening.
He told law enforcement he wasn't in town, and then they got him on video walking out of the store with beer.
We have definitive proof that you were here at this particular point in time. What else have they lied to us about?
Detectives soon uncover even more misleading statements.
We determined that he had misrepresented his past as well, and that there was criminal history that suggested that he had in fact been involved in some pretty serious things outside the state of Washington.
Investigators are convinced the man is hiding something. And for the second time in less than 12 months, they raid the home of a local resident, along with a storage unit located half a mile away.
Nobody really wanted to think about what they might find there, but it was on everyone's mind for sure. People were coming and saying, did they find Lindsay? Is it that guy? Is it that guy?
That night, all I could think about was Elizabeth Smart. And I kept telling myself, Elizabeth Smart came home. Lindsay's gonna come home. That this is the one that's gonna help bring her home.
But once again, investigators find no evidence connecting the man to Lindsay's disappearance.
I know it's frustrating for a family when a lead or a tip doesn't pan out, and it's a huge letdown for you as well.
It is. It's frustrating when you think you're headed somewhere and then you find out that maybe that's not the case. And, you know, it happens a time or two, and it can be very frustrating.
2 years into the search for Lindsay, authorities have miraculously scrolled through every frame of the gas station's surveillance footage and whittled down the list of unknown subjects to just 3 men. Men they believe could hold the key to finding Lindsay and her kidnapper.
Are there any vehicles that remain on that footage that you just have not been able to connect with yet?
The primary one that we're still looking for is a white Honda Ridgeline. It has a sunroof, and we believe it's going to be 2006 or 2008. And we've also got a couple of individuals in the video that we'd like to talk to. One of them may be associated with the Ridgeline. One is of a male, a heavier male, muscular male, with a juvenile that walk into the store about the same time that the Ridgeline appears on one of the cameras.
Not knowing what happened and not knowing who a potential suspect is, where they may live, or if they still live in the area. That's unsettling, I think, for a lot of people that live in this town.
I want my daughter. I want her to come home alive. It's possible. It's feasible. I just wish that whoever took Lindsay would man up and let her go, you know, turn her into the nearest PD or hospital or whatever. Just let her go home.
You still have you. You don't know what to do. You have to watch every car that comes by you, every person, and you don't know, like, if you should feel like you're safe or if you should be scared and not leave the house at all.
I have a niece the same age as Lindsay, and she's just a few months older. And I look at how much she's changed, and it just kills me because I think of everything I'm missing with my daughter. She's just gone. And I'll be here waiting when we find her.
Investigators haven't given up searching for Lindsay or the 3 unidentified people on the surveillance tape. Those individuals could shed light on what happened to Lindsay that evening and where she is now.
Lindsay Baum was last seen in McCleary, Washington on June 26, 2009. At the time of her disappearance, she was 4 feet 9 inches tall, with brown eyes and dark blonde hair. Today, she would be 13 years old. If you have information about this case, please go to mylifetime.com/vanished and click on the tips button.
When a person vanishes, family members are often confused about what they can do to help bring their missing loved one home. But when one woman vanishes after a chance encounter on the streets of Atlanta, her mother snaps into action and soon finds herself face to face with a suspected killer.
Atlanta, Georgia, the jewel of the New South. Sharon Williams and her family have lived in the city's working-class Adamsville neighborhood for generations. With the help of her mother, Sharon raised 2 children, including her youngest, Demetria Hill.
Demetria was very soft-spoken, easygoing, sweet girl, just a nice young lady.
By age 19, Demetria has a son of her own and dreams of a bigger life for both of them. The teenage mother is furiously prepping for her GED exam while spending every spare moment raising her son, DeMarco.
She really took on this role as a young mother with seriousness and responsibility.
Right, exactly. She wanted the best for him. She tried to do her best to get it for him.
But all that would change on December 3rd, 2001. Around 2 p.m., Demetria pays her grandmother a visit. She stays about an hour before deciding to make a run to the convenience store down the street. Demetria leaves DeMarco there to play. Demetria's mom, Sharon, arrives just moments after her daughter leaves.
Did Demetria's grandmother tell you where she was going?
No, she did not.
Did she happen to tell your mother what time she'd be back?
She probably just said that she was going to go out for a minute and she'll be back later.
But several hours pass, and there's no sign of Demetria. She's not answering her cell phone, and by the following morning, Sharon has started searching the streets of Adamsville for her daughter.
I knew that my daughter is not going to just walk away like that. She got a little kid at home, and she wouldn't just never get up and just walk away and leave her child.
A day later, Sharon receives her first clue about Demetria's disappearance. A friend of Demetria's, named Tamila Jones, informs Sharon that she bumped into Demetria on the way to the convenience store and decided to join her for a soda. According to Tamila, just as she and Demetria were finishing their sodas, a handsome stranger pulled up in a black Camaro and struck up a conversation with them.
They met this guy that was driving a black Camaro, T-top black Camaro, with a North Carolina tag on it. And the guy approached my daughter and asked her, did she want to go out for dinner?
The man, who identifies himself only as Joe, opens the door to his Camaro and invites Demetria to get in. Though Joe seems harmless, Demetria asks Tamila to accompany her.
We went to the wing place on Martin Luther King, and we got us some wings and whatever. We sat down and ate, laughing, and we left there. We rolled around, just riding.
According to Tamila, Joe is nothing short of a perfect gentleman, and around 8 p.m., he drives her to her house so that she can check in with her family. By the time Tamila comes back, Demetria and Joe are pulling out of the driveway. It's the last time anyone sees Demetria Hill.
My daughter never did come back to pick up Tamila.
After hearing Tamila's story, Sharon is convinced something terrible has happened. She seeks out the help of Atlanta police.
She was very tenacious, very adamant that something was very wrong.
Detective Tom O'Neill officially declares Demetria missing, but the department's resources are stretched thin.
Within the Atlanta Police Department's homicide unit, I, at the time, was the only missing persons detective. I was averaging about 1,150 cases per year. One person, that's a pretty enormous workload.
While the formal investigation may be slow to ramp up, Sharon Williams is in high gear, searching her hometown for any trace of her daughter. She's also on the lookout for the black Camaro in which Demetria was last seen.
Miss Williams has lived in this community for quite a while. She knows the happenings in that neighborhood, so she felt very comfortable in going around and asking the hard questions and demanding answers.
Sharon's hard work pays off when a local man comes forward with a tip.
He had called me and told me that the same description of the car that I had gave him, he said that car is in my apartment complex right now.
Without hesitation, Sharon races to the scene.
She went and got the tag number herself and gave it to me, and I was able to check the vehicle and find out the owner.
The vehicle belongs to one Joseph J. Brown. A background check reveals Brown has a disturbing criminal history, including arrests for both assault and kidnapping. On February 15th, Detective O'Neill questions Joseph Brown about Demetria Hill's disappearance.
You wanted to start from the time that you met this young lady and go forward?
The time when I met her, I was at the gas station. She asked me, where I was up from, and I told her I was from North Carolina. Just basic small talk.
I found him to be very sly, very cool. If I had not investigated this young man and known what he was capable of, I could have never guessed it. It was amazing.
Brown admits to spending the afternoon with Demetria, but claims that he dropped her off at her grandmother's house that night.
Once I dropped the girl off, I didn't see her anymore.
With no witnesses, Joseph Brown's story is hard to contradict. But as the interview draws to a close, he makes what police believe to be a critical mistake.
What I'm hearing is that you're like, well, we think that you killed her.
He just simply denied having anything to do with killing her. Now, that meant a lot to me because I didn't know she was dead. I just knew she was missing.
Brown's unexpected reference to murder is telling, but with no evidence connecting him to Demetria's disappearance, police have no choice but to release him.
I still, at this point, had no evidence other than he was with her on the day of her disappearance.
In Atlanta, Georgia, 19-year-old Demetria Hill has vanished. Her mother, Sharon, has led police to a prime suspect, Joseph Brown. But the cops don't have enough physical evidence to charge Brown with any crime. Still, Sharon refuses to give up, and in April 2002, she boldly decides to confront Joseph Brown all by herself.
Sharon, walk me through your first encounter with Joseph Brown.
I was sitting at work and I was saying to myself, why am I at work when my daughter's missing? So I left work, I went to Joseph's house, and I knocked on his door to ask him, where's my daughter?
You had to have been shaking once you got up to the door.
Yes, I was. I was a nervous wreck. He came to the door and I asked him, I said, where's my daughter? Then that's when he invited me to come into his apartment.
Once inside the apartment, Joseph Brown's hospitality quickly turns to rage.
He was ranting and raving about not having anything to do with her disappearance and so on. But, of course, Sharon knew better, and she was not going to let this go.
He told me that I have destroyed his life, his career. I said, I don't care about your life and your career. I just need you to tell me where's my daughter. And when I left out to go get in my car, that's when he came behind me and wrote down my tag number.
Minutes later, Brown contacts police, claiming Sharon Williams is harassing him. Detectives are stunned, but not sympathetic.
That lady was absolutely fearless. To put herself in that position, I told her, he has a history of harming women, and he could have easily have hurt you.
Did you have any fear for your own life when you were in Joseph Brown's apartment confronting him?
I didn't care how the situation was going to turn out. The only thing I'm thinking about, the whereabouts of my daughter.
Despite Sharon's bravery, 4 months pass without any new developments. Then, in September 2002, police make a shocking discovery. Just over 2 miles from Joseph Brown's apartment, an investigative team led by Detective Jonna Phillips has discovered the body of a young woman, burned beyond recognition. Could it be Demetria Hill? The remains are too decomposed to say for sure. But one detail leads authorities to fear the worst.
When I first approached the scene, one of the first parts of the skeletal remains that I saw was the skull, and there was a gold incision of a letter D on the top canine tooth of that skull.
My daughter had a gold tooth with her initial. They call her Didi for short, with her initials on her gold tooth.
The matching dental work proves the body is Demetria's. Coroners determine the cause of death to be homicide. Now more than ever, Sharon believes that Joseph Brown is responsible for her daughter's death. But forensic teams can't find a single trace of DNA evidence linking Brown to the body. For nearly 2 years, the case languishes without a single new development. Then, on June 29, 2003, Joseph Brown is arrested again, this time for assault. The victim is his own girlfriend, Shanella Ross.
Shanella and Joseph had been together for several months when an altercation between the two of them occurred, at which time Joseph had become violent towards Shanella. There was some choking and pushing out of a vehicle.
The incident could be a link connecting Joseph Brown to the murder of Demetria Hill.
You have what's called similar transactions. So if there is a person who is charged with one crime and there are similar crimes that they've been convicted of, those particular incidents can be brought within the courtroom prior to the case actually being heard.
Which, in theory, would prove Brown's propensity for violence and bring investigators one step closer to charging him with murder. But Shanella Ross suddenly drops her charges against her boyfriend and even posts his bail.
I guess she was scared of something, where he might retaliate on her while he in prison or when he out of prison.
Determined to see Brown pay for his crimes, Sharon calls Shanella Ross and personally begs her to reinstate the charges. Sharon's plea works. Shanella Ross reinstates the charges. Joseph Brown is booked for assaulting her, and he's also charged with the kidnapping and murder of Demetria Hill.
She was the number one person that was the reason why we was able to get this case in court.
May 16th, 2005. After months of legal wrangling, Brown finally pleads guilty to the assault of Shanella Ross and to the assault and kidnapping of Demetria Hill. He denies killing her, and the murder charges are dropped. Still, Brown is sentenced to 25 years in prison.
Sharon, you took this man off the streets.
I can't imagine him breathing the same air I breathe and walking past me. I can't imagine that.
I know Demetria would be so proud of you.
That's what a mother would do for her child.
Sharon Williams' determination helped put a violent criminal behind bars. But there are thousands of unsolved cases out there, cases that need your help. Let's take action to bring the missing home and criminals to justice, because someone out there knows something.
If you have information about any of the missing people featured on this program, please go to mylifetime.com/vanished and click on the tips button.
It's been 7 years since Demetria was taken from you. Do you think Demetria would be proud of DeMarco if she could see him today?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Because he has been on the honor roll ever since kindergarten. And I know she would want to see him, to see how he has grown and how he became a little young man. She would just be so proud of her son.